Okay.
Got it.
Now today, this morning, we were able to finish 2 chapters. So we're going to try to attempt to do that tonight. As we inch closer to finishing. So we're going to look at Acts chapter 22 and 23 tonight. Now, how many folks we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 folks. Let me see. Oh, that will be, each of you will read 13 verses each.
Okay.
Bless you.
Yeah, it's my allergies. They're killing me like crazy. We still have pollen out.
Yeah, that's okay.
The pollen has not died yet because we haven't had the first frost yet. Once we get the first frost, then my allergies will start to die.
Just give me a second. Well, someone else is coming. So we have 6 people now. So we probably
Yeah, Susan's coming on right now.
get everybody to read. Let me see. Hold on again.
Susan coming on from Chicago.
Yes. No, I had to plug my laptop and thing in. So
Hey,
Hello.
Sue.
I'm
That's
in
all
there.
right.
Hear us okay?
Hi. Good evening.
Good
Can you hear us?
evening.
Yes. It's 75 degrees here, Father Tony.
That's
Where
what
are
it is,
you,
75?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
In Chicago, it's 75 degrees in Chicago?
No, I'm in central Illinois. So
Oh, in central Illinois, yeah.
yeah, 75, beautiful sky, warm.
That's
Golf
so
weather.
warm for November. I wish it was 75 here. It's like in the 40s for us here on Long Island, Susan.
Yeah. Well, we're living the good
We're
life.
starting to feel like more like fall weather now.
Sure, it's only 77.
1, 2.
Trust me, we're enjoying every second.
I bet.
Good
I
for
was playing
you.
pickleball and doing yard work. Yes. Oh,
Yeah, I did that already today.
it's one of
Father?
those aha
Yeah.
days. Yes. So,
Father,
Yes, please.
the program that they're at doesn't start till 6:30. So if you're desperate to talk to her, ask
No,
her
that's
to call,
fine. It
text
is
her and ask her to call later.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Don't worry. I'm not too. Yeah, I need to speak with her because I got to get some stuff out, and I need to know. And that, you know, how long will that finish?
No, I don't. But that's why I'm saying if you text her now, she can call you when they're done.
Oh yes. Oh, I could text her anytime and tell her that. I'll text her whenever you're finished, and I'll tell her to call me when she gets
yeah.
home.
Linda won't be on tonight.
Hold on a minute. 1, 2, 4.
It means we all have to read more. Oh no.
6, 2. Okay. All right. So what will happen is everybody gets to read 11 verses. Now, let's see. This ends at where? Well, one person will read 10 verses. The last person will read 10 verses, but everybody else will read 11 verses.
Okay. I'll go first.
Okay.
I'll go
So,
second.
Susan, you'll
Yeah,
read from, you'll read from 1 to 11.
Right.
Bryce, 12 to 22.
Okay.
I'll read next.
Iris, 23 to the next chapter, verse 3. I think that's right. Let me just make sure that's right. 23 to... Yeah, that's right.
2, 3. Okay.
And then, so that's Iris. Who wants to go next?
I'll read
Marilyn.
next.
Marilyn, you'll read verses 4 to 14. Who wants to go next? George, 15 to 25. And the next Marilyn, 26 to 35. You got it all there?
Yeah.
All right, Susan, 1 to 11.
We're doing a marathon. Okay,
Yes, beginning at chapter 22.
all right. Brothers and fathers, listen now to my defense. When they heard him speak to them in Arabic, they became very quiet. Then Paul said, I am a Jew, born in Tarsus of Cilicia, well, that one, but brought up in this city. I studied under Gamaliel
Gamaliel.
and was thoroughly trained in the law of our ancestors. I was just as zealous for God as you are today. I persecuted the followers of this way to their death, arresting both men and women, throwing them into prison. As the high priest and all the council came themselves to testify, I have obtained letters from them to associates in Damascus, and went there to bring these people as prisoners to Jerusalem to be punished. About noon, I came near, sorry, these glasses aren't good. Came near, where am I? Came near Damascus. Suddenly a bright light from heaven flashed around me. I fell to the ground and I heard a voice say to me, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? Who are you, Lord? I asked. I am Jesus of Nazareth, whom you are persecuting, he replied. My companions saw the light, but they did not understand the voice of him who was speaking to me. What shall I do, Lord? I asked. Get up, the Lord said, and go to Damascus. There you will be told all you have been assigned to do. My companions led me by hand into Damascus because the brilliance of the light had blinded me. Sorry.
You.
These
Right.
glasses.
Okay,
12 to 22.
22?
12 to 22.
Well,
Oh,
Well.
chapter 12, okay.
No, verse
some-
12.
Oh, verse 12, chapter 22, verse 12. Someone named Ananias, a devout man, according to the law, who had a good reputation with all the Jews living there, came and stood by me and said, Brother Saul, regain your sight. And in that very hour, I looked up and saw him. And he said, the God of our ancestors has appointed you to know his will, to see the righteous one, and to hear the words of his mouth. Since you will be witnesses for him, all the people of what you have seen and heard. And now, why are you delaying? Get up and be baptized, and wash away your sins and call on his name. After I returned to Jerusalem, I was praying in the temple. I fell into a trance and saw him telling me, hurry, get out of Jerusalem quickly, because they will not accept your testimony about me. But I said, Lord, they know that in the synagogue, after synagogue, I had those who believed you were in prison and beaten. And when the blood of your witnesses, Stephen, was being shed, I stood there giving the approval, guarding the clothes of those who killed him. He said to me, go, because I will send you far away to the Gentiles.
22.
Then they listened to him to this point. Then they raised their voices, shouting, wipe this man's off the face of the earth. He should not be allowed to live.
Thank you. Verse 23 to chapter 23, verse 3. Iris?
as they were shouting and throwing off their cloaks and flinging dust into the air, the commander ordered Paul to be taken into the barracks. He directed that he be flogged and questioned in order to find out why the people were shouting at him like this. I've got new glasses, sorry. As they stretched him out to flog him, Paul said to the centurion standing there, is it legal for you to flog a Roman citizen who hasn't even been found guilty? When the centurion heard this, he went to the commander and reported it. What are you going to do? He asked. This man is a Roman citizen. The commander went to Paul and asked, Tell me, are you a Roman citizen? Yes, I am, he answered. Then the commander said, I had to pay a big price for my citizenship. But I was born a citizen, Paul replied. Those who were about to question him withdrew immediately. The commander himself was alarmed when he realized that he had put Paul, a Roman citizen, in chains. The next day, since the commander wanted to find out exactly why Paul was being accused by the Jews, he released him and ordered the chief priests and all the Samaritans to assemble.
Sanhedrin.
Then he brought Paul and had him stand before him. Paul looked straight at the Sanhedrin,
Sanhedrin.
and said, My brothers, I have fulfilled my duty to God in all good conscience to this day. At this, the high priest Ananias ordered those standing near Paul to strike him on the mouth. Paul said to him, God will strike you with whitewashed walls. You sit there to judge me according to the law, yet you yourself violate the law by commanding that I be struck.
Thank you, Iris. Marilyn?
Yeah,
Cyrus?
those standing nearby said, Do you dare to insult God's high priest? And Paul said, I did not realize, brothers, that he was a high priest, for it is written, You shall not speak evil of a leader of your people. When Paul noticed that some
Now remember that, okay? Remember that.
when Paul noticed that some were Sadducees and others were Pharisees, he called out in the council, Brothers, I am a Pharisee, a son of Pharisee. I am on trial concerning the hope of the resurrection of the dead. When he said this, a dissension began between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. The Sadducees say that there is no resurrection or angel or spirit, but the Pharisees acknowledge all three. Then a great clamor arose, and certain scribes of the Pharisees group stood up and contended. We find nothing wrong with this man. What if a spirit or an angel has spoken to him? When the dissension became violent, the tribune, fearing that they would tear Paul to pieces, ordered the soldiers to go down, take him by force, and bring him into the barracks. That night, the Lord stood near him and said, Keep up your courage. Just as you have testified for me in Jerusalem, so you must bear witness also in Rome. In the morning, the Jews joined in a conspiracy and bound themselves by an oath, neither to eat or nor drink until they had killed Paul. There were more than 40 who joined in this conspiracy. They went to the chief priests and elders and said, We have strictly bound ourselves by an oath to taste no food until we have killed Paul.
Yes, correct. Go ahead, George. Thank you, Marilyn.
You, together with the Sanhedrin, must now make an official request to the commander to have him bring him down to you, as though you meant to investigate his case more thoroughly. We, on our part, are prepared to kill him before he arrives. The son of Paul's sister, however, heard about the ambush. So he went and entered the compound and reported it to Paul. Paul then called one of the centurions and requested, Take this young man to the commander. He has something to report to him. So he took him and brought him to the commander and explained, The prisoner Paul called me and asked that I bring this young man to you. He has something to say to you. The commander took him by the hand, drew him aside, and asked him privately, What is it that you have to report to me? He replied, The Jews have conspired to ask you to bring Paul down to the Sanhedrin tomorrow, as though they meant to inquire about him more thoroughly, but do not believe them.
Excuse me.
More than 40 of them are lying in wait for him. They have bound themselves by oath not to eat or drink until they have killed him. They are now ready and only wait for your consent. As the commander dismissed the young man, he directed him, "Tell no one that you have given me this information." Then he summoned 2 of his centurions and said, "Get 200 soldiers ready to go to Caesarea by 9 o'clock tonight, along with 70 horsemen and 200 auxiliaries. Provide mounts for Paul to ride and give him safe conduct to Felix, the governor." Then he wrote a letter with this context.
Thank you.
Claudius with this, to his excellency, Governor Felix, greetings. This man was seized by the Jews, and they were about to kill him. But I came with my troops and rescued him, for I had learned that he is a Roman citizen. I wanted to know why they were accusing him, so I brought him to their Sanhedrin. I found that the accusation had to do with questions about their law, but there was no charge against him that deserved death or imprisonment. When I was informed of a plot to be carried out against the man, I sent him to you at once. I also ordered that his accusers to present to you their case against him. So the soldiers, carrying out their orders, took Paul with them during the night and brought him as far as Antipatris. The next day, they let the cavalry go on with him while they returned to the barracks. When the cavalry arrived in Caesarea, they delivered the letter to the governor and handed Paul over to him. The governor read the letter and asked what province he was from. Learning that he was from Sicilia, Sicilia. He said, "I will hear your case when your accusers get here." Then he ordered that Paul be kept under guard in Herod's palace.
Thank you all so much.
Cilicia.
Cilicia.
I said it wrong.
Cilicia.
Cilicia. That's what it is.
And
If it
he.
Some
was
may say,
one
some
word
may say,
together, I would know it.
some may say Cilicia, but Cilicia.
I have trouble.
Now you find here in
Cilicia
chapter
was actually a
22,
concentration camp during the Second World War.
you
That was
hear,
a death camp
oh, okay, Bryce. You hear
that
here
the Germans killed innocent people in.
you hear here in chapter 22, Paul starts out by telling people about his story. One of the things first that we need to recognize, or when I said story, his personal testimony. One thing when we ended the last week with chapter 21, we realized that Paul asked the commander to allow him to speak to the crowd, and the commander thought he spoke Greek. Since the commander probably assumed that he was an Egyptian insurrectionist. But then when Paul does begin to speak, and the commander gives him permission to speak, Paul speaks in Aramaic, which is a dialect of the Hebrew language. And from the time that people realized that he could speak Aramaic, it was like, a country like Haiti, their national language is French, but they speak Creole. So Aramaic was likened to Creole. But the fact that they realized he could speak Aramaic, obviously it tells you that they became very quiet. When they heard him, verse 2 in chapter 22, when they heard him speak to them in Aramaic, they became very quiet. And then we see Paul goes in to this testimony about himself. I am a Jew, born in Tarsus of Cilicia, but brought up in this city, Under Gamaliel, I was thoroughly trained in the law of our fathers and was just as zealous for God as any of you are today. I persecuted the followers of this way, meaning Christianity, Christians, to their death, arresting both men and women and throwing them into prison, as also the high priest and all the council can testify. I even obtained letters from them to their brothers in Damascus and went there to bring these people as to Jerusalem to be punished. Now, so here you see, he starts talking about he's a Jew, and as I said to the others this morning, Paul had a multiplicity of characters because he was a Jew, he was a Roman, he was a Christian, he embodied a whole lot of various, and you will see, as you read earlier, he was a Pharisee, and the son of a Pharisee. So he had a multiplicity of personalities, in the sense that when he wanted to be a Jew, he was a Jew, and when he wanted to be a Roman, he was a Roman, and he made that quite clear. So here he's telling folks that he is a Jew. So he is talking about his strong Jewish heritage. And then he goes on to talk about how he persecuted people, including people who were people of the way. And also then he will go on to talk now about what happened to him. Damascus says, about noon, as I came near Damascus, suddenly a bright light from heaven flashed around me. I fell to the ground and heard a voice say to me, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? And here you hear this whole miraculous conversion that takes place on the road to Damascus, because Paul had left Jerusalem, was on his way to Damascus, which is north, going to bring back more people of the way so that they can be to Jerusalem, so they can be punished. And while on his way there, yes, Susan.
What is the way?
The way was the name that was referred to Christians. That's what they were called, the way.
Oh.
Before they became Christians, before they were called Christians at Antioch, the people of the way was what we were all called at one time. We were called people of the way.
Okay, I didn't know.
And it comes, I believe, from the whole notion of Jesus being the way, the truth, and the life. But yes, that's what we were called, people of the way.
Oh, good. Okay,
that's what Christians were referred to before they were referred to Christians at Antioch.
And Paul was persecuting Christians, even though he was?
Oh, he was persecuting. Of course, he was persecuting the Christians. This was before he was converted.
Oh, converted.
All of his persecution. He talks about, even later on in this chapter, how he stood up and watched Stephen. He was a big proponent of Stephen's stoning and death, and how he watched the clothes of the people who were doing it and all that sort of stuff. You read that earlier. But yes, Paul was a big persecutor and of people who were Christians until he was converted.
So this is the conversion. Okay.
So this is the conversion now that we're seeing in verse 6 and following of chapter 22. And one of the things that we have to and we do as a church celebrate the feast, or commemorate, I should say, the conversion of St. Paul on January the 25th. That is when we celebrate his conversion, or commemorate his conversion. Okay. So just imagine he's traveling with all these people, and and they were riding horses to go and fetch more Christians to bring them back to Jerusalem to have them punished for being Christians. And this is where he encountered the risen Christ. And Jesus says to him, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? And again, when the name Saul, Saul is used, whenever God or Jesus used that, you know this is a big deal. Just like how you will know when God speaks to Samuel and he called his name twice, Samuel, Samuel. and so you see the same thing here with, and I think he did it with Abraham, and
Yes, he did it with Samuel
Moses,
in the first book of
and-
Samuel,
and-
I believe.
right, and then Moses, when when God calls your name twice, or Jesus calls your name twice, you better listen. You bet. So if you ever encounter somebody in your thing calling your name twice, you better listen up, man.
Yeah, I've never heard anyone calling me, please.
God is
I
speaking
never
with
even
you.
see God's face to face, please.
God is
Well,
speaking with you.
if they use your middle
So-
name, you're really in trouble. Yeah.
You know you're in trouble. You know you're in serious trouble.
Yeah, because then you sound like my
no.
father or my mother then when I was a kid,
Right,
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
or
Okay.
even my grandparents.
Yeah. So
Sorry.
then Paul says, "Who are you, Lord?" So obviously he realizes that the Lord is speaking with him. And Jesus responded, "I am Jesus of Nazareth, whom you are persecuting." And all of this is part of the conversion experience. And then in verse 9, Paul says, Luke writes, "My companions," well, Paul says this, "My companions saw the light, but they did not understand the voice of him who was speaking to me." So obviously, you know that this conversion experience was for Paul and Paul alone. That even although others were there and they saw the light, they did not understand or understand the voice or know what was going on. And then Paul writes and then Paul says in verse 10, "What should I do, Lord?" I asked. And the Lord said, "Get up and go into Damascus. There you will be told all that you have been, assigned to do." My companions led me by the hand into Damascus because the brilliance of the light had blinded me. So even although, and just imagine it, the brilliance of the light blinded Paul, but it did not blind the other fellows who took him by the hand and brought him to Damascus. And because the experience was for Paul and Paul alone. And so he was blinded by the light. And then you find in verse 12 that a man named Ananias came to see me. He was a devout observer of the law and highly respected by all the Jews living there. He stood beside me and said, "Brother Saul, receive your sight." And at that very moment, I was able to see again. So, and remember, and I was looking for the part, and I haven't had a chance to look at it today, but obviously, if you know the story of Ananias, when God also brought a vision to Ananias, telling him that this man Paul was going to be coming to him, and that he needed to greet him and to do whatever God tells him to do. And Ananias was like scared because Ananias knew that Paul had a very bad reputation, and that Paul was a persecutor, that Paul was involved in the killing of Christians. And Paul and Ananias was like, "God, who are you talking to? Me? Deal with that guy who killed all these people? You want me to talk to him?" No. God had to let him know. God had to let him know that he was a changed man, and that there was no worry. He didn't need to worry about him hurting him or whatever. So you see here that Paul is brought to Ananias, and Ananias restores his sight, obviously with the help of God. And then you find in verse 14, Ananias gives and following, Ananias gives him some marching orders. He says, "The God of our fathers has chosen you to know his will and to see the righteous one and to hear words from his mouth. You will you will be his witness to all people of what you have seen and heard. And now what are you waiting for? Get up, be baptized, and wash your sins away, calling on his name." So here we see that Paul now is about to be baptized a Christian. And what this also tells you is that you have a man who is as notorious as Paul, who went around persecuting people, who went around aiding in the murdering, the martyrdom of people, and yet God changes him, God transforms him, and God then turned him into one of the most ardent Christians you will ever meet. I mean, if you look at the New Testament, apart from Jesus, Paul is the next person that that you have who really carried this Christianity really forward. And he did that even more so than the apostles and the other apostles that were following, that were a part of Jesus's ministry. Yes, Iris.
So who would baptize Paul? Saul as he was then.
Well, most likely Ananias. Ananias would have been
Okay.
most likely it was Ananias, or it could have been anybody else. But Ananias at that time, although he was a Jew and was liked by the Jews, he would have been a Jewish Christian, and therefore he could have done it, because I mean, baptism, as it is even today, is not a sacrament. Is a sacrament that anyone could do, especially in cases of emergency.
Mm.
So now Paul is baptized, and then you see in verse 17, when I returned to Jerusalem and was praying at the temple, I fell into a trance and saw the Lord speaking. Quick, he said to me, leave Jerusalem immediately, because they will not accept your testimony about me. So he goes back to Jerusalem. Now, just imagine this. The man leaves Jerusalem, an ardent persecutor of Christians. He was going to Jerusalem. He got his marching orders, his paperwork from the council to go and get those people as prison, those Christians in Damascus, and bring them back as prisoners to Jerusalem to be punished. So the man leaves a persecutor. Now he returns to Jerusalem. He has no prisoners. He is a completely different man. He's no longer the persecutor any longer. He's advocating now for the same people he was originally persecuting before he went to Jerusalem. He's now one of them. And so, obviously, when he gets back to Jerusalem and is that kind of a person, folks there will wonder, well, what happened to this guy? Is he crazy? Is he something happened to him? What has happened to him? Because he's not the same person that we thought he was when he left. Furthermore, for the fact is, they're still the same people wanting to persecute Christians and kill them and punish them and so forth. So if he's now one of them, obviously they will probably want to kill him too, because he's not who they would have seen him as a traitor.
They couldn't trust him.
And they couldn't trust him. And you know what people like to do with traitors. So you see here, he's praying, he gets another vision, and he's told to leave Jerusalem immediately, because the people will not accept his testimony about me. He's coming back to tell them, this Jesus that we were persecuting before, he's a good guy. How do you tell that to folks who don't think he's a good guy, who thinks that the Christians are destroying their religion, which is the Jewish religion, and so you get to this point. Then in verse 19, he replied, Lord, these men know that I went from one synagogue to another to imprison and beat those who believe in you. And when the blood of your martyr Stephen was shed, I stood there giving my approval and guarding the clothes of those who were killing him. Then the Lord said to me, go, I will send you far away to the Gentiles. And that is a turning point for those who are listening to him. Because all up to now, we get the impression that the audience is listening to him attentively, because he's speaking Aramaic. So they know what he's talking about. They think he's like one of them, and so they're listening to him. Until he mentions the name Gentiles. And that raises its ugly head. Verse 22, the crowd listened to Paul until he said this. Then they raised their voices and shouted, rid the earth of him, he's not fit to live. Again, it goes back to this whole notion of Gentiles and Jews don't mix. It's like oil and water. They do not mix. So when you were telling me that you went and you were mixing with Gentiles and eating with them and drinking with them and doing whatever else with them, that's a no-no for the Jewish people. So from the time they find out that he went and was with Gentiles, they now see that he's not fit to live because he's an outcast as far as they're concerned. He has broken the laws of Judaism. And so at verse 23, as they were shouting and throwing off their cloaks and flinging dust into the air, and this whole notion of flinging dust is just a representation of how angry they were, the same way they were stripping their clothes off. They were that angry. You know, some people, when they get angry, they throw things. Well, this is how they express their anger, by flinging dust into the air and throwing off their clothes. The commander ordered Paul to be taken into the barracks, and he directed that he be flogged and questioned in order to find out why the people were shouting at him like this. And so you see here, the commander wanted to know why the crowd was acting so violently against him, and the commander also ordered that he be put in barracks and that he be flogged, or in some translations may say scourge, which is what happened to Jesus as well.
Well, he got beheaded like John the Baptist.
But the funny thing is, yes, Bryce. But the funny thing is, when you continue to read this, you realize as they stretch him out to flog him, which was more or less probably putting him up or having shackled down to something where he's standing up, it could be so he will be whipped and he can't move, or at least even if he can move, he can't get away. Paul said to the centurion standing there, "Is it legal for you to flog a Roman citizen who hasn't ever even been found guilty?" Because that was against the law. You could not flog or punish a Roman citizen until he went through a trial. And he was not tried. So they had not found him guilty. So therefore, they should not have been punishing him. And you see how important this piece is, because as soon as he says that, in verse 26, when the centurion heard this, he went to the commander and reported it. "What are you going to do?" he asked. "This man is a Roman citizen." And the commander went to Paul and asked, "Tell me, are you a Roman citizen?" And Paul answered, "Yes, I am." Then the commander said, "I had to pay a big price for my citizenship." And Paul replied, "But I was born a citizen." And in those days, citizenship was real. I mean, it is today as well, but it was really important. In fact, also too, those who were born a citizen of a country used to be seen more important than those who had to pay to get their citizenship. And yes, George.
How would they know
That what?
that he was a citizen? Anybody could say, "Hey, I'm a citizen."
But that is true, and that is, and you are correct. Anybody can say that. But I think the premise is here that, I mean, we knew that his father was, and therefore I think the premise set here is that that's who he was. Somehow they knew that he was a Roman citizen. I mean, a man like him would have been quite known due to the fact of the persecution that he did all over the place. So he would have been well known. Yes, George.
Well, he would have been well known, but they didn't know he was a citizen.
Right. The thing is about it is they didn't even know who he was. But I mean, in terms of, because you remember, somebody, when the commander at first wanted to know if he was some insurrectionist. So I mean, they did not know who he was. But I'm thinking that obviously they would have tried to find out who he was. I mean, it mentioned here that the commander wanted to know why the people wanted to flog him in the first place. So I think it can be said that it was much deeper than just he say, she say kind of thing, that they must have realized or found out somehow that he was a Roman citizen. Yes, Marilyn.
Well, I
Plaza.
think one of the questions comes up is that, wasn't he traveling with people that were from Greece? And might they have been speaking back and forth to each other in Greek?
In terms of,
Well, them not recognizing that he was a Roman citizen. I'm sorry.
Yeah, he
That would
traveled around.
recognize him as a Roman citizen. The fact that he spoke Aramaic, never mind, forget what I said.
no, yeah, I'm kind of like, okay, but the thing about it is I mean, going back to George's question though, I think that I mean, it is almost like the same thing he's saying that I'm a Jew. You know, how do they know that he was a Jew? And so I think the premise is set that they would have found out that he was what he said he was. All that detail has not been put in, but they would have found out.
Robert,
Yes, Iris.
Robert, do we know what Paul looked like? Was he tall, short? I mean, have we any idea of what kind of
Paul?
he was? Yes. Do we know?
I would advise you to Google a picture, Google and see if they have pictures of him. There's pictures
really?
of Paul.
Come on.
Okay, I'll Google it.
Yeah, you know, Google. I don't know if
I
you will ever get an exact picture of him.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any mention of him in the Bible as to what his stature was like. So any pictures that you see is probably any pictures that people have concocted about him. If my mind serves me correctly, he's always portrayed as a man with dark hair, I think. But I may be wrong.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I imagine him as a very big man, you know, for some reason. But I'll Google it and see what comes up.
Yeah, I mean you can Google it and see what comes up. I mean, I've seen pictures of him before.
Well,
to be honest with you, I can't remember what he looks like. I think, as I said, he is because, and I'll tell you this, for me, I don't pay too much attention to those kinds of things because they're what people's perceptions are, and may not be, and may not be a. Now here, I don't know if you can see that. That's supposed to be a picture of him with a lot of beard.
Okay, so he is big. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry to
That's a picture of him. Huh? Yes, Marlene.
It would be a painting, not a picture. They didn't invent the camera yet.
Well, same difference. A painting of him. You know.
I have one.
This is supposed to be a younger one of him.
Okay, so yes, that's how they portray him in the movies too.
Yeah, that's a younger one of him. This is another one that he's portrayed again, a younger one of him.
It's handsomer by the minute.
Oh, he's getting more and more handsome. Well, let me give you an old one to show you that he wasn't that handsome. But there are various depictions of him. Now here's another one that he's not as handsome. You might not think. I don't know.
Oh no,
That's Paul.
Tilt your phone.
Here he is.
Well, I thought George had a good question.
When
How
he
do
was
you know
older.
you're a citizen?
Yeah, when he was older. So, you know, there's always people's caricatures of who they think he is and what he looked like and that sort of stuff. But as I was saying, in those days, the horse, yes, he's always depicted with a horse and him being on the ground and that sort of stuff for the conversion. If you were to go and Google the conversion pictures, you will see there's always a horse in them. He's on the ground looking up at the light, and that sort of stuff. And sometimes with the men in the background. Yeah. Thanks, Marilyn. Yeah. But in those days, I was saying is that citizenship was extremely important, and people who were born a citizen were seen as even better than those who got their citizenship. So I said to the others this morning, I said, so I guess your all American citizenship is more than mine. And so one laughed and said to me, no, Father, that doesn't exist anymore. Yours is just as good as ours. So,
Wow.
you know,
How they knew.
so you have that there. And then in verse 29, those who are about to question him withdrew immediately. The commander himself was alarmed when he realized that he had put Paul, a Roman citizen, in chains. And here you see that he realized it. So again, going back to your question, George, is that, as I said, I think it was deeper than just him saying so. It could have been more than that. Verse 30, the next day, since the commander wanted to find out exactly why Paul was being accused by the Jews, he released him and ordered the chief priests and the Sanhedrin to assemble. Then he brought Paul and had them stand before him. And so now we find that Paul now comes before the Sanhedrin to be questioned. The same way again, Jesus was brought before the Sanhedrin as well in his day. Any questions on 22 before we go to 23?
No.
Okay. Now, as you see, Paul looked straight at the Sanhedrin and said, my brothers, I have fulfilled my duty to God in all good conscience to this day. At this, the high priest Ananias, who is not the same Ananias, a different Ananias, and also remember, he's different also from the man, the high priest Annas, who Jesus went to. Remember, Jesus went to an Annas and Caiaphas and all these folks. Now you see Paul is going to Ananias, is in front of Ananias. And Ananias ordered those standing near Paul to strike him on the mouth because of what he obviously said. In verse 3, then Paul said to him, God will strike you, you whitewashed wall. You sit there to judge me according to the law, yet you yourself violate the law by commanding that I be struck. And that terminology, whitewashed wall, is just a simple thing to say that you may look pretty on the outside, but you are bad on the inside. And that is really what it is, that you may have an attractive exterior, but inside of you is unclean. Inside of you is not a good person. You know, as I said the others, you know, sometimes we see some person who may be beautiful or handsome and think, wow, this must be a really nice person, until they open their mouth and start to speak and how they treat you. And then you realize all that exterior beauty starts to dissipate as compared to a guy or a girl who you may think is not that good looking or handsome. And then when they speak and the way they treat you, you realize how beautiful that person is. So here, Paul is calling Ananias a hypocrite, for one. But at the same time, he's saying, you may have a good job, you may be the high priest, but really and truly, inside of you is no good. You're no good. You are unclean. As sometimes they might put it. In other words, he's calling the high priest a hypocrite because you're judging me for the same things and telling me I'm doing wrong against the law, and you yourself are doing the same thing. It goes back to the whole notion of pointing at me, and the rest of the fingers are coming back at you, and there. And it caused a commotion because you read in verse 4, those who were standing near Paul say, you dare to insult God's high priest? And it shows. And then Paul replied, brothers, I did not realize that he was the high priest, for it is written, do not speak evil about the ruler of your people. So, I mean, Paul knew that that you don't speak bad about those in authority, so to speak. However, the high priest at the time, I mean, someone asked me, you know, would he not have known that it was the high priest? And I said, not necessarily. If he was in the temple, yes, he would have known who was the high priest because he would have been bedecked in all his finery as the high priest. But coming before a Sanhedrin that comprises of Sadducees and Pharisees together, they were all probably just dressed in their normal streetwear, in robes, and therefore it may not have been easy to realize who was the high priest from who wasn't. Oh, where am I? So then in verse 6, you see, then Paul, knowing that some of them were Sadducees and the others Pharisees, call out in the Sanhedrin, my brothers, I am a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee. And this is something about Paul. Paul is always ready with, I mean, sometimes you really gotta think, is he really all these things? He's a Jew, he's a Roman citizen, now he's a Pharisee. And the son of a Pharisee. And he goes on, I stand on trial because of my hope in the resurrection of the dead. Now, once you talk about the resurrection of the dead, and you got Sadducees around there, you are going to blow the whole place down. Because it gives you here, you see, when he said this, a dispute broke out between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. For the Sadducees say that there's no resurrection, there are no angels, there are no spirits, but the Pharisees acknowledge there are all of these things. And so once you can start talking about there's spirits and angels and there's a resurrection, the Sadducees are going to tear you to pieces because they don't believe in the resurrection, those who are Sadducees. So in verse 9, there was a great uproar, and some of the teachers of the law who were Pharisees stood up and argued vigorously. We find nothing wrong with this man, they said. What if a spirit or an angel has spoken to him? And they're only adding fuel to the fire by saying, suppose it was a spirit or an angel. You're telling this to Sadducees, they don't believe in this kind of thing. And you see then in verse 10, the dispute became so violent that the commander was afraid Paul would be torn to pieces by them. And he ordered the troops to go down and take him away from them by force and bring him into the barracks. And the following night, the Lord stood near Paul and said, take courage, as you have testified about me in Jerusalem, so you must also testify in Rome. And you will see then later on in this book, you will see that Paul does go to Rome. Where it ends, that's where he is.
Right, and they believed most of his letters, like letters to the Hebrews, the Corinthians, Thessalonians, and all of his letters that he wrote even to Titus and Timothy. They believe, most historians believe that he wrote these letters while he was in prison.
Correct.
I mean, they don't really know for a fact, but it's a possibility he would have written these letters while he was in prison.
Well, that's the time that he had more time to do these things because there was nothing else for him to do but to write. When he was not in prison, he was advocating for God and preaching all over, and when probably didn't have as much time to do the writing. But you're right, Bryce. And then in verse 12, the next morning, the Jews formed a conspiracy and bound themselves with an oath not to eat or drink until they had killed Paul. More than 40 men were involved in this plot. Somebody asked me, so these men must have died because they didn't get to kill him.
I thought when I was reading it.
More than 40 men were involved in this plot. And as I said to the others, please take the number 40 with a grain of salt. Numbers in the Bible do not necessarily mean that they are exactly that amount of people. 40 is a number that is biblical. You know, there's 40 days and 40 nights that Jesus was tempted in the wilderness.
So 40 days and 40 nights that the Hebrews are waiting for Moses to come down from the mountain.
And the 40 years and all sorts of stuff in the desert. I mean, so 40 is a biblical number. And so
now, why is 40 a biblical number? I mean, there had to be a reason.
Oh gosh, there is, you're asking me a good question now and I don't remember, but there is. The same way, the same way, like the number 7 is a letter, as a number of completion, because it's the creation. God created in 6 days and he rested on the seventh, and that's 7 is always seen as a completion, as a number of completion. But if I remember, Bryce, I will try to check out what 40, the significance of 40, but there is, and I can't remember right now.
Yeah, because I don't
The
understand.
same
I
way,
mean,
the same way there was a significance with 144,000 that is mentioned in Revelation. It has to do something, I think, with the 12 tribes by 12 something. And
yeah, because when Noah
that's
was
how
so
they
the
get
flood, he was flooded for 40 days and 40 nights. I mean,
it.
rained for 40 days. But I just got to ask a question, Father, because
Mhm.
maybe there were 40 days. I mean, I don't really know for a fact.
Mhm.
I mean, not only that, after Moses did come down the mountain, everyone
Mhm.
says like, well, Moses killed the people. I'm like, no, God
Mhm.
killed the Hebrews. However, now God didn't want to kill his people, but they had no choice. They got him angry.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
God destroyed the 10 Commandments, not Moses.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. Verse 13. More than 40 men were involved in the plot. They went to the chief priests and elders and said, we have taken a solemn oath not to eat anything until we have killed Paul. Now then, you and the Sanhedrin petitioned the commander to bring him before you on the pretext of wanting more accurate information about his case. We are ready to kill him before he gets here. So they were about to ambush him while he was on the way from wherever he was in prison, in the barracks, down to coming before the Sanhedrin again. And it is quite possible that these people could have been zealots, because zealots were very much in what we would call today terrorists, and so it is quite possible that they could be from that kind of a group where they were prepared to kill him and they were fasting as a result, so as
You
to
mean to
do
like
this.
annihilate him and eliminate him all the face of the earth?
Yes.
So they weren't Jews that were not trusting him, you think?
Well, there would have been. I mean, Zealots were Jewish. It was a Jewish sect as well. So,
Okay.
in fact, I think if my mind serves correctly, Jesus had a disciple that was a Zealot. Which was the one that was a Zealot? I don't even remember. Simon. It was a Simon, I think, that was a Zealot. But there was a Zealot involved in one of the followers of Jesus. So, yeah.
Okay.
And then in verse 16, you didn't know that Paul had a sister and a nephew. You see here, but when the son of Paul's sister heard of this plot, he went into the barracks and told Paul. So Paul's nephew tells him that they're out to kill him. And this is the only place in the Bible, I think, that mentions about Paul, any member of Paul's family, where they mention 2 members, his sister and his nephew. It is also believed that even after he became a Christian, his family deserted him, because they would have been devout Jews and practiced Judaism. And then after he converted, they themselves did not pay much attention to him. And
I
then
wonder
Paul,
why they would not want to pay attention to him.
that happens. He broke away from the religion and that happens all the time. That happens today, in today's world. I mean, Christians are probably the most lenient in terms of going and marrying anybody. There are other faiths that don't do that very readily. And especially if you have a devout family like that, the parents are very much upset when you go and marry outside of both your race, your nationality, and your religion. And that's still prevalent today.
Oh yeah.
And then in verse 17, Then Paul called one of the centurions and said, "Take this young man to the commander. He has something to tell him." So he took him to the commander, and the centurion said, "Paul, the prisoner, sent for me and asked me to bring this young man to you because he had something to tell you." The commander took the young man by the hand, drew him aside, and asked, "What is it you want to tell me?" He said, "The Jews have agreed to ask you to bring Paul before Sanhedrin tomorrow on the pretext of wanting more accurate information about him. Don't give in to them, because more than 40 of them are waiting to ambush for him. They have taken an oath not to eat or drink until they have killed him. They are ready now, waiting for your consent to their request." So the commander dismissed the young man, and cautioned him, "Don't tell anyone that you had reported this to me." And so here is it that even although it is possible that Paul's family or relatives may not have been there for him or what have you, this young man, this nephew, still is backing Paul. I laughed this morning. I say, probably whenever Paul saw him, Uncle Paul used to give him a little bit of money, and so he always remembers that. As growing up, you went to your grandparents' home or your uncles, and they will give you a little bit of money, and you feel really good. Sometimes you didn't even used to let your parents know you got it.
Yeah,
Well,
I can remember my grandparents would give me money if I got good grades, and both of my grandparents, my mother's side and my father's side, would actually do
Good.
that to me.
Good.
Well, I could say my grandma Meyer probably did that for me. I would say probably my grandpa Howe and also my grandma Howe gave me money, only if I got good grades.
Good.
Yeah, if I got bad grades,
Well,
I got grounded by my parents.
deserve it if you got bad
Yeah, I
grades.
didn't even deserve it, please. I mean, I was an
So-
average student. I wasn't an honor society student, that's for sure. I was never in
Yes.
AP classes, that's for sure. Or even Regency's classes, that's for sure.
Yeah, and it is also possible, and I'll tell you this. I mean, I haven't heard George ask me yet, how come Paul's nephew knew what was going on? But how did Paul's nephew know that they were planning on killing him? And it is quite possible that his nephew might have been a zealot. You never know. He could have been a zealot, or at least he had some kind of relationship with somebody that might have been a zealot. And hearing it, even he told his uncle what was going to happen. So again, it doesn't tell you that, but it is quite possible that he could have had a relationship with the zealots, whether it was a direct relationship or an indirect relationship, because he was a young man, and these, you never know what these young men were up to in those days, and he could have been part of that whole shebang. But the fact remains is that he knew about the plan, and because this is his uncle, this is his kinsman, he could not allow it to go ahead. He went and he told his uncle. Then in verse 23, then he called 2 of his centurions and ordered them, "Get ready a detachment of 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, and 200 spearmen to go to Caesarea at 9 tonight. Provide mounts for Paul so that he may be taken safely to Governor Felix." He wrote a letter as follows. And the interesting is, as I was looking at this and I was thinking to myself, my God, that's a real battalion to carry one man. You're talking about over 400 people. 400 people. It was almost as if they were going expecting that there would be some sort of a problem ahead, to carry like 470 people to protect Paul so that he gets there safely. And then and the commander, the Roman commander, whose name is Claudius Lysias, he wrote a letter as follows. Claudius Lysias, to His Excellency Governor Felix, greetings. This man was seized by the Jews, and they were about to kill him, but I came with my troops and rescued him, for I have learned that he is a Roman citizen. I wanted to know why they were accusing him, so I brought him to their Sanhedrin. I found that the accusation had to do with questions about their law, but there was no charge against him that deserved death or imprisonment. When I was informed of a plot to be carried out against the man, I sent him to you at once. I also ordered his accusers to present to you their case against him. So here, Claudius, the Roman commander, sends this letter outlining the what has transpired. Yes, sorry, George, go ahead.
The Roman commander sounds like a suck up.
Yes, he does.
Sounds to me like he was looking for a promotion.
Probably was. Probably was.
Yeah.
He wants the governor Felix to, you know,
To notice him,
He's
yeah.
the
to
man.
notice him. To notice him. And that is quite possible. He
The
wanted him to
400.
notice him. Yeah. So that's a good observation, George, because it is true. It is true.
Maybe he was a Christian too, the commander.
The commander. Oh,
Maybe.
maybe you never know. Maybe, or he has leanings towards it at least.
Yeah.
Maybe the fact that he wants to protect Paul.
Mhm.
Yeah, maybe. And then in verse 31 and following, so the soldiers carrying out their orders took Paul with them during the night and brought him as far as Antipatris. The next day they let the cavalry go on with him while they returned to the barracks. When the cavalry arrived in Caesarea, they delivered a letter to the governor and handed Paul over to him. The governor read the letter and asked what province he was from. Learning that he was from Cilicia, he said, I will hear your case when your accusers get here. Then he ordered that Paul be kept under guard in Herod's palace. And one of the things that you always realize about these guys, these Roman authorities, is that they're very careful that they don't overstep another person's jurisdiction. You saw it in Jesus. That's why he went from so many different places. Annas, Caiaphas, Herod, Pontius Pilate, they all went all over the place with him so that nobody feels left out of the loop. And so you see here Felix asking which territory he is first to make sure that it's his territory that he can try him. And after he finds out that, yes, he can hear the case based on where he's from, because if he was from another territory that he couldn't try him, he would have probably sent him on to that other person, as they did with Jesus when it was Jesus' trials. So it tells you that they were very much conscious of territories and not wanting to encroach on other people's territories. Any questions?
Nope.
No.
Everybody's happy?
Good summary.
Got my map I've been following.
Yes, you see where
Oh.
Damascus is, right?
Yes.
I have to
Right.
put-
It's
I have
right
to
on
bring
on that map is on the right-hand side of the map.
Yep.
Yes, go ahead, Marilyn.
I just wanted to point out that Acts 9 verses 1 through, I think it's 30.
The 30,
One
which is the actual conversion of Paul.
is the conversion of Paul. So if Susan wanted to reread that part, it might help.
Oh,
her.
yes.
Yes.
Paul, Susan, Marilyn is telling you if you want to read about the whole notion of Saul's conversion again, to refresh, you can read chapter 9.
Acts chapter 9.
Yeah.
Yeah, Acts chapter 9. Who
Okay,
said that
thank
just disappeared? Somebody just disappeared off the screen.
Somebody's-
Marilyn.
Yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
Maryland.
Marilyn Cyrus.
Oh, Marilyn, Cyrus, yes.
To 23, I think is what it is. 1 to 23.
Thank you.
I think it goes on
Yes.
and gets off that topic as it goes on, but
Well, I would read up to 31 if I were you. Read that whole section which deals with
Must have
him in
read that before,
Damascus.
because we,
Yeah, we did it before, yes. Unless you weren't there
reread it.
that day,
Thank you.
it's possible.
no, I will, because that's important.
Yeah.
Oh, so it wasn't an angel, it was a white light. I guess that was my,
Yes, it was a blinding light.
so it wasn't an
It
angel.
made him
or-
blind.
Okay,
And oh yes, and in that same chapter, you will see the Ananias story, where Ananias talks about he's heard reports with a man, how he used to harm him and all of that. That's where you will find the Ananias story as well.
thank you. Okay, yeah, I'll reread that.
Yes. In that same chapter. Any other questions?
Nope.
No, good one.
All right, well, everybody have a good dinner. I'm going to go home
Are
shortly,
we-
I hope.
Are we doing two next time too then, 20?
Yes, I will. I'm right now, yes, but I'm going to make. Let me ask a question. All of you can meet if I needed to meet earlier next week. All of you can meet earlier.
Yeah, no
Yeah.
problem. What time next week? Next Wednesday?
I haven't decided yet, just in case, because I may have something to attend, but I would like to really get in next week as well. So,
Yeah, I'm open all day then too.
yes, Marilyn.
Pam may not be able to. She's probably at the store,
Well, yeah, yeah, that would be the only person.
but she can hear the recording.
Although she can hear it afterwards.
Now, I'm just saying like an hour, like say 5 o'clock. Am I going to be able to?
Yeah, I have to think about I can't remember now what time thing starts, but it could be maybe even 3 or 4.
3 or 4, I can do it. I'll be
Yeah.
back in town
But
by.
I will, because I have to drive a distance as well. So,
Yes, I'm in Orlando, but I should be back by then.
yes. So, but I will let you
Where do
all
you live?
know
Fort
by the day
Lauderdale?
before. I'll
So
let you know
how
what's
far
happening.
is it for you to get home to Fort Lauderdale, Father?
No, I'm not going there. It is just that I have an engagement to attend, so I have to. Where I is from down south is nearly 2 hours.
Really?
Yes. Yeah.
Traffic as well, it's horrendous.
Yeah. But even without
Yeah, well, you have
traffic,
to head north.
one time it took me to get down there 2.5 hours because of traffic.
Yeah, I bet, because you got to head 95 south and then head 95 north getting back.
Yeah, but I also have to go west as well.
Will you,
Oh yeah, you
toward
got to
the
get west on the Sawgrass
toward
Express.
the
That's true.
Everglades.
so you'll send out an email, will you, for us?
I will send out an email. Yes, I will let you all know what I've decided in terms of what time to have the class. Because the following week we're not going to have class because that is Thanksgiving week. That's the day. That's Thanksgiving Eve. So the following week we will not have class. But I wanted us to have class.
So we have
I'll
class
let you know.
next Wednesday the 15th, and then no class the 22nd.
No class on the 22nd, but then there will be class on the 29th.
29th,
So 24th,
and then December 6th, 13th, and then the 20th.
No,
And
there
the
will not be any. Well, I'm hoping that we'll be finished by either December 6th or 13th, the latest.
All right, and then I guess we're going to start something brand new after that.
Yes. Yeah, this morning I was talking to the others and something came up and they were thinking that probably they would like to learn and it wasn't that they came up with it. It was just in a conversation. I don't remember what they were talking about. It had something to do with ordination. And I don't remember what I don't remember. You're okay, Marilyn?
Can you hear us, Marilyn
You're
Sears?
okay, Marilyn?
I think
Yeah,
we
Can you
got
hear
it.
us, Marilyn? Because you took
Yeah,
off for a second.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. It just said I lost internet and
Yeah, okay. But I don't remember. I think we're talking about something to do with ordination. And I don't remember what the topic was or what the subject was. And then we decided, and then I said to them, oh, it might be a good thing to do the 7 sacraments, to have a teaching
back
on
in
the seven sacraments, because there's a lot in there.
And where is that? Where is that in part of the Bible?
The sacraments?
Yeah.
Well, baptism and Holy Eucharist is, but not the others as they are there. No.
No,
And
that's
that's-
like in the Episcopal books, however. That's in the prayer books.
Yes, but they're classified by the church as sacraments. The 2 that are baptism and the Eucharist.
Right, so that's not in the Bible. None of that stuff is in the Bible.
All right, hold on, are called the gospel sacraments or the Dominical sacraments because they're the ones that were instituted by Jesus himself. The other 5 came on afterwards that the church felt that they should be also classified as sacraments. But they've always given precedence to baptism and the Eucharist because they're the Jesus instituted ones. But so we may do something on that. So you get some more, because baptism, for example, is a topic where people still struggle with. And always, and also too, confirmation is another one as well. So we can do that.
Yeah, I wouldn't
Okay.
mind it. I mean, I'd have to get my prayer book out, but
And to learn about the differences in
Think about it.
Oh, I think the reason why it came out is someone asked if a deacon can do what a priest does. I think that's where it came up. And I had to say no. And there are certain tasks for deacons and certain tasks for priests, and priests can do more than what deacons can do, the same way bishops can do more than what priests can do. And
All right.
and I think that's where it all came up. Out of
all
that
right. Good night,
context.
Father.
All
I
right.
think
Good night, Bryce. And good night, everyone.
Good
Have a
night,
good
have a
night.
Good night.
Love to all of you.